A nurse says to the billionaire, "Sir, my husband has that same birthmark." But what happened next broke her in ways she never saw coming. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital flickered overhead, casting pale reflections across steel trays and polished floors as paramedics rushed in and out. Alarms screamed, stretchers collided, and voices barked orders over each other, chaos woven into routine. But in Trauma Bay 3, a different kind of storm was gathering. "Hold pressure! He's losing blood!" Emily Donnells pushed through the cluster of residents and security guards, her scrubs wrinkled, her hair barely held together after 3 back-to-back double shifts. She stepped to the side of the bed where the billionaire lay. Tony Hale, one of the most powerful men in New York, now pale and drifting in and out of consciousness after a helicopter malfunction. He didn't look at he didn't look at anyone. His mind seemed somewhere far darker than the room he was lying in. Emily reached to adjust the oxygen mask when the hospital gown slipped just enough for her to see it. A mark on his ribs, sharp and unmistakable under the harsh white lights. A flame-shaped birthmark, the same one she had traced on her husband's skin 1,000 quiet mornings. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Sir!" Her voice cracked, barely audible over the monitor, beeping faster and faster. "Sir, my husband has that same birthmark." Tony's eyes snapped open. For a moment, the entire room froze. No alarms, no shouting, no metal clattering, just his hollow gaze locking her in place. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "What did you just say?" His voice was shredded, frantic. "Where did your husband get that mark?" Emily swallowed hard, her throat tight. I don't know. He's had it since birth." Tony's entire face drained of color. Something broke inside him. Fear, recognition, disbelief. And just like that, Emily knew she had stepped into something far bigger than medicine. If you want to know how a simple birthmark unraveled a 30-year-old secret, shattered a billionaire's world, and tore apart a marriage built on love and lies, don't look away. This is a story about identity, betrayal, bloodlines, and the truth that changes everything. 6 hours earlier, Emily's alarm pierced the darkness at 4:15 a.m., dragging her out of the thin sleep she had managed. She blinked at the cracked ceiling of their apartment, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic below. In the tiny kitchen, Jace had already brewed coffee, her favorite ritual he never missed, no matter how exhausted he was. She smiled at the mug, waiting for her on the counter. She had no idea her world was about to collapse before sunrise. Emily wrapped her cold fingers around the ceramic cup and let the warmth settle into her palms. The apartment was small, painfully small, but it was theirs, and it was safe. 2 rooms peeling paint, a bathroom door that never fully closed, and a single window that refused to stay unlocked. But it was home. "Morning, Em." Jace emerged from the bedroom, his hair still damp, wearing the same faded t-shirt he slept in most nights. His eyes were soft despite the shadows beneath them. "You didn't sleep," she said quietly. He shrugged. "Couldn't. I heard you tossing around all night." Emily leaned against the counter, taking a sip of the coffee. Sweet, creamy, exactly how she liked it. Jace always knew. "Another double shift?" he asked. "Yeah, they're short again. Trauma's been insane this week." He gave a sympathetic grimace. "I'll be here when you get back." The way he said it, steady, grounding, made her chest ache. Even when life pressed hard on both of them, Jace was the calm in her storm, her anchor, her constant. But there were things he never talked about, things he avoided like a man walking around the edges of a cliff he knew too well. Birth parents, childhood memories, hospital records, anything involving where he came from. Emily didn't push. Everyone had scars they preferred to keep hidden. And Jace loved her with a depth and gentleness that made everything else feel small. As she got dressed, she glanced at him leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with that quiet admiration he never vocalized. She could live with the unanswered questions, or so she thought. The city was still asleep when Emily stepped out into the freezing dawn air, her breath forming small ghosts in front of her. The subway screeched, crowds swelled, and by the time she reached Mercy General, the sun had barely risen. Trauma was already overflowing. Emily, thank God you're here, a resident called out as she clocked in. We had 5 overnight accidents and a cardiac arrest in the lobby. It's going to be hell today. Perfect, she whispered under her breath. She tied back her hair, snapped on gloves, and dove in. The hours blurred together, vitals, IV lines, chest compressions, blood draws, broken bones, tears, screaming, alarms. The routine she had lived for years. The routine that grounded her even when everything else felt unstable. By mid-morning during a rare 2-minute break near the supply closet, she closed her eyes and let her head fall against the wall. That's when it hit her, that memory she never fully understood. The first time she saw Jace's birthmark. They were only 6 months into dating. She had slept over at his apartment, a small, messy place filled with thrifted furniture and hand-me-down everything. He was shirtless, leaning over the tiny bathroom sink brushing his teeth when she noticed it. A flame-shaped birthmark on his ribs, sharp edges, natural symmetry, almost like it had been drawn on him. "What's that?" she had asked, sliding behind him and tracing it with her fingertip. He stiffened. "It's nothing, just a birthmark." "It's kind of cool. Looks like fire." He pulled away almost too quickly. "Yeah, I guess. Doesn't mean anything." But his voice had trembled, and that was the first time she saw him unsettled. She never forgot it. Emily snapped back to the present as the trauma doors slammed open again. "Incoming helicopter crash victim. VIP, major blood loss. ETA 30 seconds. She straightened up, her exhaustion clearing like smoke. That was hours before she saw Tony Hale lying on a stretcher. Hours before her breath froze in her lungs. Hours before she saw the same flame-shaped mark burned into his skin. Emily didn't know it yet, but the memory of that touch, that moment in Jace's bathroom, would haunt her for the rest of her life. The chopper victim arrived with an army of security in black suits, not typical for trauma cases. Emily pushed her way through as they flooded the bay. "Clear the area, stand back." But the doctors needed space, not interference, and she snapped back with professional authority. "If you want him alive, let us work." Tony Hale, billionaire, tech empire giant, philanthropist, lay unconscious, his hair sticky with blood, his breath shallow. Emily barely had time to register the significance of who he was before instincts took over. "BP dropping. Get oxygen on him." She lifted his gown and saw multiple bruises. And then, the mark, the flame, the same flame she had touched on her husband's ribs. Her brain stuttered, shocked, confused, instantly terrified, but she pushed it down, focusing on stabilizing him. Only later, after Tony snapped awake and grabbed her wrist, did she understand the mark wasn't just unusual. It was meaningful. It was genetic. It was dangerous. And it was about to ruin her life. Hours passed. Tony stabilized enough to be moved to a private room, heavily guarded. Emily wasn't assigned to his care, but the hospital buzzed with whispers. "He's conscious. He's asking for someone. He's furious." During the shift change, she passed by the closed door of his room and heard voices. Low, tense, urgent. She wasn't the type to eavesdrop, but something pulled her to pause. "You're sure?" Tony's voice was strained. "Yes, sir," another doctor replied. "The flame-shaped birthmark appears only in Hale males. It goes back 3 generations." Emily froze. 3 generations? Only Hale males? Her breath hitched. No, it couldn't be. She must have heard wrong. Coincidence, that was all it was. "It had to be," Tony continued, bitterness thick in his tone. "Then he can't be alive. The baby was taken 30 years ago. They said he was dead. My father—" His voice cracked, then hardened. "My father wouldn't lie about something like that." Emily felt faint. Baby, stolen, 30 years? She stepped back, a hand over her mouth. "Don't jump to conclusions," she told herself. Birthmarks could be random. Genetics were weird. People shared features all the time. But her heart wouldn't steady. She turned to leave, to run, but a large hand clamped down on her shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of Tony's security men said. "We need to ask you a few questions." Her stomach dropped. Sorry, I have patients to see." "This won't take long." He guided her firmly toward Tony's door. Panic rose in her throat. She felt trapped, exposed, like she had stepped into someone else's nightmare. Tony looked up the moment she entered. His eyes were sharp, piercing. Not with anger this time, but with fear. "You," he whispered. Emily froze. "What's your name?" Tony demanded. She hesitated. Emily Donalds." Tony tilted his head. "Your husband, what's his name?" Her pulse pounded so loudly she almost couldn't speak. Jace Donalds." Tony inhaled sharply, his expression shifting. Horror, recognition, hope, devastation, all crashing together. "Bring me her file," he ordered the guard, "and get a full background check on her husband. Every detail." Emily backed away, shaking. "No, please, I don't know what's going on." Tony stared at her like she held the key to a locked grave. "That birthmark," he said quietly, "belongs to my family, and only my family." Emily felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. She didn't wait for the security men to escort her out. She turned and bolted, stumbling through the hall, needing air, needing distance, needing space to breathe before her lungs collapsed. She reached the stairwell and gripped the railing, knuckles white. What does this mean? What if it's not coincidence? What if— No, she couldn't even think it. She sank to the steps, chest rising and falling with shallow breaths, tears pushing at the corners of her eyes. The seed of dread had been planted. Deeply, violently. And Emily knew, no matter how desperately she wanted to pretend otherwise, her world wasn't just bending. It was breaking. Piece by unrelenting piece. Emily didn't remember the subway ride home. One moment she was stumbling out of the hospital doors, the cold air hitting her like a slap, and the next she was climbing the stairs to their apartment, her legs moving on autopilot. Her mind was too loud, too chaotic. Tony's words echoing inside her skull. "That birthmark belongs to my family, and only my family." Her hands were still trembling when she reached the front door. She had to pause, gripping the doorknob until her knuckles whitened. When she finally stepped inside, the warm smell of garlic and tomatoes greeted her. Jace was cooking, her favorite dinner, pasta with homemade sauce, the kind he only made when he wanted her to feel cared for, or when he sensed she needed comfort. He turned at the sound of the door. His face brightened, then dropped instantly. "Em?" His voice was soft but alarmed. "What happened? You look shaken." She forced a smile. It faltered. "Long day," she whispered. He crossed the room quickly and wrapped her in a hug. Warm, steadying, familiar. Emily rested her forehead on his chest, breathing him in. For a moment, she almost convinced herself she imagined everything at the hospital. Almost. "You're freezing," he murmured, running a hand down her arms. "Sit down. Let me get you a blanket." "No," she said too quickly. She grabbed his hand. "Just stay here a second." He frowned, confused. Emily stepped back enough to look at him, her mind spinning. How do you ask your husband if his entire identity might be a lie? She didn't know where to start, so she started wrong. "Jace," she said slowly, "can I ask you something about your childhood?" He stiffened. It was subtle, a tiny shift in his shoulders, but she felt it like a sharp crack in the air. "My childhood?" he repeated. "Question." Her pulse jumped. "I was just thinking. You never talk about it much." "There's not much to talk about," he muttered, turning back to the stove. Emily followed him. "Jace, please." He paused, wooden spoon hovering above the pot. He didn't turn around. "What do you want to know?" Her voice came out small. "Your birthmark." He froze completely. She watched his back rise and fall, slow and forced, like each breath hurt. "What about it?" he asked without turning. Emily swallowed hard. "Do you know where it came from? Or, if anyone in your biological family had it?" He turned abruptly, eyes flashing with something she rarely saw in him. Fear. "Why are you asking me this?" Emily's throat tightened. "Please don't get upset. I'm just curious. I saw something today and it reminded me of yours." "What did you see?" His voice wasn't angry. It was panicked, defensive, raw. She hesitated. She wasn't ready to say Tony's name. "On a patient. At work." Jace's jaw clenched. So you're comparing me to some random guy in trauma? It wasn't just any guy, Emily whispered before she could stop herself. Jace stared at her, trying to read what she wasn't saying. What happened? Emily opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because how did she tell him she saw his birthmark on the body of a billionaire who reacted like he'd seen a ghost? She sat down at the small kitchen table. Her legs were shaking too much to stand. Jace, do you remember anything from before your adoption? He let out a humorless laugh. You know I don't. I've told you that 100 times. But do you really not remember? She asked gently, desperately. Nothing at all? A hospital? A family? A name? His frustration flared. Why are you pushing this? Where is this coming from? Emily bit her lip until she tasted blood. I just need to understand. Please. Jace dragged a hand through his hair. My adoptive parents died when I was 12. They didn't tell me anything about my real family. They barely talked to me at all. He turned away, leaning on the counter, breathing hard. Emily stood and walked to him slowly, placing a hand lightly on his back. I'm not judging you, she whispered. I just need you to talk to me. If something happened to you, I want to know. His shoulders trembled. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he exhaled shakily and walked out of the kitchen. Emily followed him into the bedroom. He went straight to the closet, reached up to a high shelf, and pulled down a shoebox she hadn't seen in years. He set it on the bed. This is all I have, he whispered. Emily sat beside him. Her heart hammered as he lifted the lid. Inside were papers, old, worn, yellowed from time, adoption forms, birth records, medical notes. Except they weren't right. Emily picked up the first document, Jace's birth certificate. The hospital name was missing. The signature line showed only scribbles. The date stamp was smudged beyond recognition. This doesn't look real, she whispered. Jace didn't look at her. I know. He handed her another paper. Look at this one. It was the same. Inconsistencies everywhere. Forgery-level inconsistencies. Emily felt her stomach drop. When did you find out these were wrong? She asked softly. Jace's eyes filled with something deep and painful. When I was 16, I requested my adoption records from the state. They sent me this garbage. No hospital, no doctor, no biological name, nothing. Emily covered her mouth. And you never told me? How could I? He snapped. Then he stopped himself, voice cracking. All my life I felt like a mistake, like I don't belong anywhere, like something important was ripped away from me before I even existed. Emily's eyes watered. Oh, Jace. He shook his head aggressively, wiping at tears that wouldn't stop coming. You want to know about the birthmark? Fine. I have no idea where it came from. No one I knew growing up had it. It made me feel like a freak. Kids asked me if someone burned me with a lighter. Emily felt her chest breaking open. I'm so sorry. I used to stare at it in the mirror, he whispered, wondering if someone out there had one too, wondering if I wasn't completely alone. But I never found anyone. I stopped hoping years ago. He finally looked up at her, eyes red, defeated. So please, Em, don't make me think about this again. Emily's breath caught, because she now knew something he didn't. Someone did have the same mark. Someone powerful. Someone connected to a lie 30 years old. She had opened a door, kicked it open. And there was no way to close it now. She took his face in her hands. Jace, I love you. Nothing will change that. But even as she said it, her heart felt heavy with the weight of the truth she hadn't told him. Jace leaned into her touch, exhausted. I don't want to lose you. You won't. But she wasn't sure. Not anymore. They stayed like that, holding each other in terrified silence, as the sun set beyond their small apartment window. Jace eventually fell asleep against her shoulder, worn out from the emotional storm. Emily gently shifted him onto the bed, tucking the blanket over him. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a message from the hospital. But it wasn't the hospital. A name glowed on the screen, unfamiliar but unmistakable. Tony Hale. Emily's breath stopped. Another buzz. We need to talk. Immediately, it's about your husband. Emily's knees nearly buckled. The world she knew, the life she lived, the marriage she cherished, was no longer stable ground. It was cracking, splintering, opening beneath her feet, and now Tony Hale was waiting on the other side of that darkness. The hospital was unusually quiet as night pressed against the windows, muffling the usual chaos of Mercy General into a dim hum. Emily sat alone in the break area, her hands trembling around a paper cup of cold coffee. Her shift should have ended an hour ago, but she couldn't go home. Not yet. Not with her mind spinning. Not with her heart dragging her into places she didn't want to revisit. She kept seeing it, the flame-shaped birthmark on Tony Hale's ribs, and the identical one on Jace. Her husband, her safe place, her mystery. She dug her nails into her palm, trying to anchor herself, but reality was already slipping. The door swung open. One of Tony's security men stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Donalds, Mr. Hale would like to speak with you, privately." Emily felt her stomach twist. Now? Now, she swallowed hard and stood. Her legs felt weak, but she moved anyway because what choice did she have? Because deep down, she knew running wouldn't save her from whatever this was. He led her down the corridor into an empty wing of the hospital, where lights were dim, doors closed, and no staff lingered. The air felt too still, too heavy. They stopped at a conference room, and the security guard opened the door. Tony Hale sat inside. He looked nothing like the frantic man in the trauma bay earlier. His face was pale, yes, but composed. The composure of a billionaire who had built an empire, survived boardroom battles, and learned to hide emotion behind steel. But his eyes betrayed him. "Please," he said quietly, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Sit." Emily hesitated before lowering herself into the chair. Her fingers twisted in her lap. The door shut behind them with a soft, ominous click. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Tony studied her like he was searching for something, answers maybe, or a ghost from the past. Finally, he exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "I owe you an explanation, Emily." She didn't respond. She wasn't sure she could. Tony continued anyway. "You saw the mark, the birthmark, that flame shape." Emily nodded, throat tight. "That mark," he said slowly, "has one origin. My family's bloodline. Every Hale son is born with it. My father had it. I have it." His voice dipped lower. "And my baby brother had it." Emily's breath caught. Baby brother. Tony's voice grew quiet, haunted. 30 years ago, the night he was born, he was stolen from the hospital. Disappeared before my parents even held him. No nurses saw anything. No cameras caught anything. The room was left untouched, as if he vanished into thin air. He paused, knuckles whitening around the arm of his chair. The hospital launched an investigation. The police got involved, private investigators. Nothing. No baby, no death certificate, no ransom note. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears. "We were told he died," Tony continued, "that he was found later, lifeless, that the trauma was too much for my mother to handle. My father insisted it was mercy not to share the details." Emily's brow furrowed. "That doesn't make sense." "No," Tony said bitterly, "it doesn't. And I believed him for years until—" He turned his gaze toward her, sharp, painful. "Until I woke up in that ER today and saw the birthmark on your husband." Emily's breath stopped. "The flame," she whispered. "Yes, and it wasn't just the shape. It's the exact pattern. Every Hale male carries a slightly unique variation, like a fingerprint." His voice trembled. "Yours matches my brother's." Emily felt cold. I don't know what this means," she stammered. Tony leaned forward. "Tell me about your husband. Where is he from?" I don't know," she admitted. "I mean, he's told me he was adopted. His adoptive parents are gone. He doesn't talk about before that." Tony's jaw clenched. "When was he adopted?" Emily squeezed her hands together. "He told me he was about 1, maybe slightly older. They didn't have exact records." Tony's breath hitched. 1 year old? That's when my father claimed my brother's remains were found." Emily's world tilted. No, no, no. This wasn't possible. Your husband, Tony said slowly, matches the timeline, the age, the birthmark, the disappearance, and the secrecy. Emily shook her head violently. No, you're drawing lines that aren't there. Jace isn't part of your family. He isn't. Tony cut her off gently but firmly. Emily, I'm not guessing. I'm telling you what I know. Emily's voice cracked. Jace doesn't even know who his birth parents are. Exactly, Tony whispered, because someone made sure he wouldn't. Her heartbeat pounded so loudly she could barely hear his next words. I believe your husband is my brother. Silence swallowed the room. Emily felt like she had been punched, like the world had shifted beneath her feet and she was free-falling with nothing to grab onto. No, she whispered, barely able to speak. No, that's not possible. You're jumping to conclusions. Tony shook his head. This isn't about conclusions, it's about truth, and I intend to find it. He slid an envelope across the table toward her. These are documents from the kidnapping investigation. Reports, photos, timelines. My father hid half of this, but we've spent years digging them back up. Emily stared at the envelope like it was poison. I need you to bring me something, Tony said. Her stomach dropped. What? She whispered. A DNA sample from your husband. Emily recoiled. Absolutely not. That's invasive and wrong, and it would break him. We are not doing that. Tony's expression hardened. I understand your fear. I do. His voice trembled with sincerity. But if your husband is my brother, he deserves to know. And so do you. Tears stung Emily's eyes. You don't understand. Jace, he struggles with identity. He always has. He barely talks about his childhood. This would destroy him. Or save him, Tony countered softly, depending on the truth. Emily shook her head, standing abruptly. I can't do this. I'm sorry. I can't. Tony didn't move. I'm not asking you to betray him, he said quietly. I'm asking you to help him find out who he really is. Emily backed toward the door. I need to go. Emily, I said no. Her voice echoed through the quiet room. She turned and rushed out before he could speak again. As she stepped into the hallway, she leaned against the wall, fighting to breathe. Her vision blurred. Her pulse raced. Her chest squeezed. No, this couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. She just needed air. She just needed time. But the second she pushed through the hospital's side exit, two men in suits stepped into her path. Ms. Donalds, one said, extending an envelope. Mr. Hale asked us to give you this before you left. She froze. Please, I don't want... It contains information we think you should see, the man said, including the real timeline of the kidnapping. She stared at the envelope. Thick, heavy, filled with answers she never wanted. Take it, the guard urged. Her hands shook as she reached out. The envelope felt like it would burn through her skin. She stepped backward, breath shallow. Are we done? She whispered. For now, the man said. But Emily, this isn't going away. She didn't respond. She turned and walked, no, stumbled, toward the parking lot, her heartbeat erratic, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Halfway to her car, she broke. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the cold pavement, the envelope slipping from her fingers and landing beside her with a soft thud. Tears spilled down her face, tears of fear, confusion, grief, and something else she didn't want to name. Because deep down, beneath all her denial, a part of her knew. She had touched that mark on Jace's ribs. She had seen the way he froze when she asked about it. She had felt the weight of his unspoken past for years. Now, finally, it had a name, a shape, a truth she never wanted to unearth. Her world wasn't cracking anymore. It was collapsing, and there was no stopping what came next. Emily had never felt guilt crawl under her skin the way it did the night she collected Jace's DNA. It was almost midnight. Jace was asleep, or pretending to be. His body curled toward the wall, breath slow but uneven, like a man trying to force himself into rest. Emily sat at the foot of the bed, her hands trembling in her lap, listening to the sound of the clock ticking in the living room. She had promised herself she wouldn't do this, promised herself she wouldn't betray his trust. promised herself she wouldn't cross the line that separated love from fear. But the image of Tony Hale gripping her wrist in Trauma Bay 3 flashed relentlessly through her mind. Where did your husband get that mark? His eyes, his panic, his desperation. And the secret he had nearly whispered, that birthmark belongs only to Hale men. Emily rose quietly and walked to the bathroom, palms sweating. She stared at Jace's toothbrush in the cup beside hers, the blue one with worn bristles, the one he replaced only when she nagged him long enough. She reached for it with a shaking hand. I'm so sorry, she whispered to the empty bathroom. She placed the toothbrush in the sterile bag Tony's security had given her. Then she glanced at the drain, where a few strands of Jace's hair clung stubbornly to the metal. Her stomach twisted. One handful of hair, one toothbrush, one truth she wasn't ready for. She sealed the evidence as though it were radioactive, because in a way, it was. The next morning, Emily delivered the DNA sample in a plain envelope, passing it off to a stone-faced man in a gray suit who didn't give his name. He simply nodded once, tucked the envelope under his arm, and walked away. Her hands felt cold for hours afterward. Every time Jace texted something sweet, lunch in the fridge, don't skip breaks today, love you, come home safe, she felt sick. She responded with emojis because anything more would break her voice. That first day became the first ripple in a widening ocean of distance. By day 2, the ripple was a wound. Jace sensed the shift immediately. Are you okay? You're quiet. Did I do something? Emily, talk to me. She couldn't. She couldn't without lying. She couldn't without breaking. Their apartment grew heavier with each passing night, like sadness soaked into the walls. They still shared a bed, but space grew between them, a silent canyon neither dared to cross. On the third morning, Jace touched her arm gently as she pulled on her scrubs. You're scaring me. His voice wasn't angry, it was broken. She swallowed the truth pressing against her throat. I'm just tired, she whispered. But his eyes said he didn't believe her, not for a second. By the fourth day, Emily felt like a ghost wandering through her own life. Work became a blur of bandages, blood, and clipped words. She avoided conversations, avoided breaks, avoided anything that might force her to think. But the results, they were coming. She could feel the truth tightening around her like a noose. On day 5, as she was restocking syringes in Trauma Bay 2, a lab courier entered the unit holding a white envelope. Delivery for Nurse Donalds. Her heart collided with her ribs. No, she whispered, not now. But the envelope was already in her hands, heavier than any piece of paper had a right to be. Her entire world was inside it. She moved to the supply closet, locked the door behind her, and sat on a crate of gloves. Her fingers shook violently as she slid her thumb under the seal. The envelope opened with a soft tear, a gentle sound, completely unworthy of the devastation waiting inside. She unfolded the paper. The text blurred at first, swimming under her tears. Then the number sharpened. Paternal relationship. Probability 99.9%. Conclusion, positive biological match. Subject A, Jace Donalds, is a direct sibling of Tony Hale. Emily's breath burst out of her chest. The room tilted, her vision pinwheeled. There it was, the truth she feared, the truth she had helped uncover, the truth that would destroy everything she loved. Jace wasn't just adopted. He wasn't just lost. He wasn't just a mystery. He was the stolen Hale child, the baby who vanished 30 years ago. The heir Tony believed was dead. The brother Tony had mourned all his life. Emily dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like a falling petal. Her hands flew to her mouth. She felt like she might vomit, collapse, scream, or all three at once. What have I done? She whispered. Her heart was a wildfire inside her chest. What have I done to him? Because this truth wouldn't just hurt Jace, it would annihilate him. A knock shattered the silence. Emily? Tony Hale's voice. Emily froze, tears streaking her cheeks, unable to move. The door creaked open. Tony stepped inside, still pale from the injuries he had suffered, but alert, almost trembling with anticipation. He saw the paper on the floor. He didn't ask permission. He didn't ask anything. He reached down, picked it up, and read it. His reaction wasn't slow. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't controlled. Tony staggered back against the wall as though he had been punched. "Oh my God," he choked. "Oh God, no, 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 no." Emily had never seen a man break so completely. He sank to the floor, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. His shoulders shook. "It's him," Tony whispered. "It's him, my brother, my brother, after all these years." He wasn't angry. He wasn't triumphant. He was grieving and grateful and horrified all at once. A perfect storm of emotion that tore the air apart. Emily slid down beside him, unable to stand. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know this would be real." Tony looked at her with wet, frantic eyes. "You don't understand. I've searched for him my entire life. They said he was dead. They told me he died before I ever held him." His voice cracked violently. "They lied to me. They stole him from me." Emily felt her heart rupture. For Tony, for Jace, for herself. Because now she knew, truly knew, that nothing would ever be normal again. Nothing would ever go back. The supply closet door suddenly swung open. Jace stood in the doorway. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He was terrified. "What's going on?" he whispered, looking between them. Tony on the floor, Emily shaking, the DNA report in Tony's hand. Emily's stomach plummeted. No, not like this. Not here. Not now. But Tony rose slowly, facing Jace with a look Emily couldn't describe. Recognition, awe, grief, love, devastation. "Jace," Tony said, voice shaking. "My God, it's you." Jace stepped back instinctively. "Who are you? What is happening?" Emily scrambled to her feet. "Jace, please, I can explain." "No," his voice cracked. "You've been hiding something from me. Both of you." Tony took a step forward. "You're my brother." Jace stared at him, then laughed, a small, hysterical sound. "What? That's insane. I don't even know you." Emily reached for him. "Jace, the birthmark, the adoption records, the DNA." "What DNA?" he demanded. Emily closed her eyes, and Jace froze. "Emily, what did you do?" Her heart imploded. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I sent in a sample. I didn't want to. I swear, I didn't want to, but they needed to know. And Tony, you tested my DNA?" Jace's voice shattered. "Without telling me?" He looked like she had stabbed him, like she had reached into his chest and pulled something vital out with her bare hands. Tony stepped forward again, softer this time. "Listen to me. I've waited decades to find you. You're my brother, not by paper, not by choice, by blood." Jace backed away, shaking his head violently. "No, no, it's insane. Emily, why did you listen to him? Why did you do this?" Emily stepped toward him through tears. "Because I needed the truth." Her voice cracked. "I needed to keep you safe." Jace's face crumbled. "Safe from what? From you?" Emily's breath caught. Tony watched the exchange, guilt pulling at every muscle in his face. "Jace," he whispered, "I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen like this." Jace staggered back until his spine hit the wall, chest rising and falling too fast. "This is too much," he muttered. "Too much." He slid down the wall, hands over his face, shaking violently. Emily knelt beside him, but he flinched away. His words were strangled, broken. "Emily, I trusted you." She sobbed. I know, and I'm sorry. And I thought I was protecting you. I thought you deserved answers. I thought—" "You thought wrong," he whispered. Tony stepped closer, gently this time. "You're not alone. Not anymore." Jace lifted his head slowly. His eyes were full of pain, fear, confusion, and the dawning horror of a man realizing his entire life, every memory, every hour's truth, was built on a lie. Emily watched him crumble, watched Tony break beside him, watched her own world fracture beyond repair. She was in the center of it all, the woman who uncovered the truth, the woman who broke the silence, the woman who broke the man she loved. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. Jace didn't speak for the first 20 minutes after they got back to the apartment. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't even look at her. He just paced back and forth across their cramped living room, like a man trapped inside a burning building with no door. Emily stood near the kitchen sink, her hands trembling as she wrung out a dish towel, unable to find the right words. Every sound in the room felt amplified. The buzzing refrigerator, the hum of the old ceiling fan, the thud of Jace's feet hitting the floor again and again. Finally, he stopped abruptly, hands gripping the back of the couch as if to keep himself from falling apart. "Emily, what did you do?" His voice wasn't angry at first, just broken, confused, like a child trying to understand a nightmare. Emily swallowed. "Jace, please, I didn't mean for this to—" "You told him." His voice rose, sharp, cracking in the middle. "You told that billionaire about my birthmark. You let him get in your head. You let him get into our life. Why, Emily? Why would you say anything?" Emily felt her throat close. "I didn't know. I wasn't trying to—" "No." He cut her off, shaking his head violently. "You opened a door I didn't ask you to open." He stepped back, fingers digging into his hair. "This can't be real. I can't be some stolen millionaire baby from 30 years ago. That's insane. My life is here. With you, not with them." Emily forced herself to move toward him, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "I know you're scared." "Scared?" Jace barked out a humorless laugh. "Scared doesn't even touch it, Emily. My whole life is—" He stopped, chest heaving. "It's not even mine anymore." Jace spiraled. There was no other word for it. He moved from panic to anger to cold silence in an endless loop. "Everything I know is fake," he muttered, pacing again. "All of it. Those adoption papers. Forged? What does that even mean? Who did that? Who raised me? Why didn't they tell me?" Emily tried to reach for him, but he recoiled like her touch burned him. "Don't," he whispered. "I don't know who I am right now. I don't know what anything means." She felt something in her chest crack open. This wasn't the man who brewed her coffee every morning. This wasn't the soft-spoken, warm-hearted Jace she married. This was a man unraveling at the seams. "Jace, please look at me." He did, finally, and what she saw in his eyes carved into her heart. Shame, fear, and something else, something deeper. A terror of losing her. "Emily," he said, voice trembling, "you should have left it alone. Why couldn't you leave it alone?" Her lip quivered. "Because I love you. Because something wasn't right. Because he recognized the birthmark." "And so what?" Jace snapped. "Not every coincidence is destiny. Not every mark is some secret family heirloom." Emily felt her shoulders sink. It wasn't just a coincidence. He told his doctor the birthmark only runs in Hale men. Jace's breath stopped in his chest. Emily regretted saying it the second the words left her mouth. He staggered back 2 steps, like she had just physically struck him. "No." He shook his head, pacing again. "No, no, no. That's not, that can't." He swallowed hard. "I'm not one of them." She stepped closer. "Even if you are—" "Don't say that!" he exploded. The room vibrated with the force of it. Emily flinched, tears stinging her eyes. "Chase!" He stared at her, chest rising and falling rapidly. His voice lowered again, cracked with emotion. "If I am," he said quietly, "then everything I've known is a lie. And I don't know how to live with that, Emily." Blah. Later that night, when Jace finally collapsed on the couch in exhausted silence, Emily stepped out onto the fire escape for air. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. It's Tony. Is he safe? I need to speak to him." She stared at the screen, stomach twisting. The world felt like it was closing in from all sides. Before she could reply, a black SUV turned the corner and parked directly beneath their building. Emily froze. 3 men stepped out. Suits, earpieces, not police, not friendly. Her breath caught. They weren't looking at the building casually. They were scanning it, watching them. She stepped back inside quickly, closing the window but keeping the blinds open just enough to peek through. And another message appeared. "Tony, do not talk to anyone from the Hale board. They're dangerous. They don't want the truth out." Emily's heartbeat hammered in her throat. Dangerous? What did dangerous mean in billionaire terms? Financial destruction? Threats? Force? The doorknob rattled suddenly. Emily spun around. Jace stood there, pale, wide-eyed. I heard something, he whispered. Is someone outside? She hesitated. I think we're being watched. Jace's body went rigid. Why? Why would anyone? Because they don't want you to be who you are, Emily said quietly. He stared at her for a long moment, then sank into a chair like the weight of everything finally crushed him. Emily, what if they take you? What if they take me? His voice cracked. What if the people who took me once come back? Emily felt her knees weaken. He never said things like that. He never let the fear in his voice show. She knelt in front of him, tears threatening. No one is taking you. Not again. Not ever. But even as she said it, her voice shook, because she wasn't sure she could protect him from something this massive. This wasn't a personal problem anymore. This wasn't medical. This wasn't emotional. This was an empire, a billionaire dynasty, trying to bury a secret they thought they'd never have to face. The truth was dangerous, and Jace was suddenly the biggest liability in their history. At around midnight, Emily checked again. The SUV was still there, still watching, still waiting. Her skin crawled. What do they want? Jace whispered behind her. She didn't turn around. They want you to stay quiet. Jace exhaled shakily. And if I don't? Emily swallowed, hard. They'll do whatever it takes to make sure no one ever hears your name. Jace stumbled back like the words physically hit him. I can't do this, Emily. I can't carry this. I can't breathe. Everything it's all gone. His voice cracked. My parents weren't my parents. My life isn't my life. And now these people want to erase me completely. Emily rushed to him, but he pulled away violently. Don't touch me, he whispered, sounding like his heart was shattering. I can't even look at you. Emily froze. Jace? She whispered. He shook his head slowly. Tears gathered in his eyes but didn't fall. You shouldn't have told him, he said. You shouldn't have said anything about the birthmark. You shouldn't have looked at him. You shouldn't have opened this door. Emily felt something tear inside her. I was trying to help. Well, you didn't. His voice cracked. You broke everything. Emily covered her mouth, choking back a sob. I didn't know, she whispered. I wish, Jace said quietly. I wish you never said anything at that hospital. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that hurts, the kind that leaves scars. Emily turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door softly behind her. She slid down the back of the door, hugging her knees, shaking with sobs she tried to muffle against her hands. Jace's words replayed on a loop. You broke everything. I wish you never said anything. Outside, the SUV headlights glowed through the blinds. The men waited, patient, cruelly calm. Emily pressed her forehead against her knees. This wasn't just emotional. This was dangerous, life-changing, possibly life-ending. And she was the one who started it. She sobbed until her eyes burned, until her voice was gone, until her body felt empty. Because for the first time since the birthmark, since Tony Hale, since the ER, Emily finally realized this wasn't just a secret. It was a war, and they were already losing. The apartment was too quiet. Emily sat at the edge of the couch, hands trembling against her knees, listening to the muffled sobs coming from behind the locked bathroom door. Jace had shut himself in there 20 minutes ago after the DNA results, after Tony's shaking voice, after her entire world buckled beneath her. She wanted to knock. She wanted to break the door down. She wanted to climb inside the darkness with him and pull him out. But she couldn't. He needed space to breathe, and she needed space to stop shaking long enough to stand again. The knock at the front door made her jump. 3 slow, heavy taps. Not impatient, not aggressive, just inevitable. Emily already knew who it was. She opened the door a crack. Tony Hale stood there, no suit this time, just dark slacks and a black sweater. He looked nothing like the billionaire the world bowed to. His eyes were restless, rimmed with exhaustion, his posture tight like a man holding himself together with the last threads of willpower. Is he here? Tony asked quietly. Emily nodded, swallowing hard. Bathroom. I need to see him. Her chest tightened. Tony, he's not okay. Tony's eyes flickered. Fear, guilt, hope all tangled together. Neither am I. Emily hesitated before stepping aside. Tony entered the apartment slowly, like he was stepping into a memory he'd buried but never outrun. She closed the door behind him, her pulse thrumming in her ears. He stared at the bathroom door as if his entire life waited behind it. Jace, Tony called gently. It's me. Silence. Another sob cut through the walls. Tony took a breath and stepped closer. Please open the door. Nothing. Then, go away! Jace's voice cracked so violently Emily flinched. Tony closed his eyes, pained. Jace, Tony tried again, quieter now. You don't have to talk to me. Just let me see you. No, you don't get to show up and pretend this is normal. Jace's voice broke into ragged breathing. I didn't ask for any of this. Tony leaned his forehead against the door, his voice trembling. I know. God, I know. Emily's vision blurred. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stop the sob rising in her throat. Tony continued, voice rough. I've looked for you my whole life. Inside the bathroom, something hit the counter. A bottle maybe, a fist, the sound of someone breaking from the inside out. Tony swallowed hard. Since I was 12, Jace. Since the night they told us the baby died. I never believed it. I never stopped looking. Silence again. Tense, fragile, pink-skinned with pain, Emily's hands shook as she leaned against the wall. Tony finally stepped back. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. Just open the door and tell me. The lock clicked. Slowly, the door cracked open. Jace's face emerged, eyes red and hollow. His hair was damp from splashing water, his cheeks streaked with tears he couldn't hide. He looked like a man drowning. He didn't open the door wider. He didn't step out. He just stared at Tony like he was staring at a ghost he never asked to meet. What do you want from me? Jace whispered, voice raw. Money? DNA confirmation? Closure? What? Tony's jaw trembled. You. Jace blinked, confused and angry. Why, you don't know me. Yes, Tony said softly. I do. Jace scoffed. You're insane. Tony shook his head. I know your face. I know your birthmark. I know the month you were born. I know the tiny scar above your eyebrow. The same one our grandfather had. I know the way your hands shake when you are overwhelmed because my hands do the same thing. Jace's breathing faltered. Tony took one step forward, careful, slow. Jace, I've been broken ever since they took you. Everyone moved on. Everyone accepted the lie, except me. Jace slammed the door open the rest of the way. His voice cracked like glass. I didn't want any of this, Tony. I know. I didn't ask to be someone's stolen baby. I know. I just wanted a normal life. Tony's voice dropped to a whisper. I wanted a brother. The word hung there between them. Delicate, impossible. True. Jace's face crumpled. I'm not him. I'm not who you think I am. Tony shook his head. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. Jace's breathing became uneven. Do you know what it feels like to find out your entire life was fake? Parents who weren't really parents? A name that isn't yours? Birth records that don't exist? And now some billionaire tells me I'm the heir to a company I don't even want. Yes! Tony exploded suddenly, voice breaking. Because that happened to me too. Jace froze. Tony's eyes burned with old, deep pain. Every day since they told me you died, I've lived with a lie. Every day I woke up knowing something was missing. I built companies, relationships, homes. None of it mattered because you weren't there. Because the truth was stolen from me too. Emily's heart twisted sharply. Two men, connected by blood, destroyed by the same lie. Jace wiped his face with shaking hands. Why didn't you stop looking? Because you were my brother. His voice wavered. You still are. Silence filled the apartment. Thick, heavy, healing. Jace sank to the floor, covering his face. Tony knelt in front of him. For a long moment, nothing existed except two men breathing in the same broken rhythm. Finally, Jace whispered into his palms, "I don't know who I am." Tony placed a hand on his shoulder, hesitant, unsure, but real. "We'll find out together." Jace sobbed, shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Tony didn't say anything else. He didn't offer empty promises or forced comfort. He just stayed there, present, steady, quiet, the way big brothers are supposed to. Emily stood in the hallway, her back pressed against the wall, one hand clawing at her chest as tears streamed down her face. Watching them shattered her, destroyed her, healed her. Her breath hitched painfully. "This is my fault. This is all my fault." Her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. She slid down the wall and hid her face in her arms, sobbing silently. She didn't hear Tony stand. She didn't hear Jace step toward her, but she felt them. Jace knelt beside her, his hand warm and trembling against her cheek. "Emily, don't cry. Please." Tony stood behind him, quiet as a shadow, eyes soft with a new understanding. "I broke everything," Emily choked out. "I should have stayed quiet. I should have pretended I didn't see." "No," Jace whispered, pulling her into his chest. "You told the truth. I just wasn't ready to hear it. But this destroyed you. It didn't destroy me." His voice was fragile but sincere. "It revealed me." Tony lowered himself beside them, sitting cross-legged on the cold floor as if he'd been doing it his entire life. "I know this is overwhelming," he said quietly, "but none of us are alone anymore." Emily looked at both men, their reddened eyes, their trembling hands, their mirrored pain. She wasn't the only one shattering. They all were. The three of them stayed on that floor for minutes that felt like hours, breathing in the same fragile silence, letting the truth settle between them. Jace took Emily's hand first. Tony placed his hand over both of theirs. The smallest of promises formed, not spoken, not declared, but felt. A promise of truth, a promise of rebuilding, a promise of family, not perfect, not healed, but together. For the first time since that birthmark changed everything, Emily didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was beginning. Emily didn't remember falling. One moment she was standing in the dim hallway outside Tony's penthouse office, watching Jace and Tony talk. No, not talk. Finally see each other for the first time in their lives. And the next, the world tilted sideways. The edges of her vision collapsed inward, like a tunnel narrowing too fast to escape. Her legs buckled. Her body dropped. She didn't even feel herself hit the floor. Just voices, blurred, echoing, muffled like they were underwater. "Emily? Em, can you hear me? Get water, now!" But all she could process was the terrifying weight in her chest. A pressure that wasn't physical. It was emotional, crushing down on her lungs like someone was standing on them. Everything she'd been carrying, the secrets, the guilt, the fear, the threats, the truth, came crashing down at once. And it broke her. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. Warmth on her cheek, the distant hum of air conditioning, a hand wrapped around hers, squeezing once, twice. Emily's eyes fluttered open. She was lying on a couch she didn't recognize. Soft leather, expensive stitching, and a blanket was draped over her. Her head rested on a pillow that smelled faintly of cedar and something clean. Something old money. Tony's penthouse. "Easy," Jace whispered beside her, his hand trembling as it brushed her hair back. "It's okay. You're safe." She blinked, disoriented. "What happened?" "You fainted," Tony said from across the room, his voice low but steady. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense, completely collapsed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, trying to sit up. Jace gently held her down. "Emily, stop. You scared the hell out of us." His voice cracked, and it was only then she realized he'd been crying. Jace rarely cried. Even in their worst arguments, even in his darkest moments of identity confusion, he always tried to hold himself together. But now his eyes were red and her heart twisted. "I'm so tired," she whispered, barely holding back tears. "I don't know how to keep doing this, Jace." He took her hand again, pressing his forehead to her knuckles. I know, and I'm sorry. You've been carrying all of this alone." Emily shook her head weakly. I wasn't carrying it alone. I was dragging both of you behind me. I feel like I ruined everything. Your peace, your safety, your identity. Jace lifted his head sharply. No, don't do that. Don't ever say that again. Tony stepped closer. Emily, if anything, you're the only one who's done anything right. Her breath caught because she didn't feel right. She felt shattered, and exhaustion wasn't just physical now. It was in her bones. You both were falling apart, she whispered, and I made it worse. I triggered everything. I should have kept quiet in that ER. I should have... No. Both men spoke at once. Tony sat on the edge of the commodity table facing her. What you did, he said slowly, intentionally, saved us. Both of us. I didn't know Jace was alive. I would have lived the rest of my life believing my brother died in that hospital. Jace nodded, squeezing her hand again. And I would have never known who I really am. I would have lived feeling lost forever. Emily swallowed hard, tears blurring her vision. But what if all of this destroys us anyway? She whispered. What if the truth ruins everything instead of fixing it? Tony exchanged a look with Jace, a silent, heavy acknowledgement, because they all knew the truth. The hail board wasn't done. Not even close. Right on cue, Tony's phone buzzed violently on the coffee table. He looked at the caller ID and his jaw tightened. Board of Directors, he answered on speaker. A cold, clipped voice filled the room. Tony, we need to discuss the complication you've created. Tony leaned back, expression hardened. His name is Jace, and he's my brother. That is not our concern, the voice snapped. Our concern is the company, the shareholders, the structure we've built. If the media discovers the heir was kidnapped and the family covered it up, the fallout will destroy everything. Emily's pulse spiked. Then maybe you should have thought about that 30 years ago, Tony said coolly. The voice ignored him. Listen carefully. The boy's identity cannot be revealed. If it leaks, Tony, the consequences will be catastrophic. Tony's eyes flicked to Jace, then Emily. And if it does leak, Tony asked, what will you do? Fire me? The board member laughed humorlessly. Oh no, we'll do far worse. A beat of silence. Jace Donalds will be discredited, destroyed, and erased legally. His wife will be dragged into litigation she cannot possibly win. And you, Tony, will lose everything your father built. You'll go down with them. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Not a threat. A promise. The line went dead. The room was silent. Jace stood slowly, his hands shaking with rage. They're going to destroy us. Tony looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as the lost brother he spent decades searching for, but as someone he needed to protect with his life. Not if we move first. Emily swallowed hard. We can't run, she whispered. They'll hunt us forever. They'll bury us quietly and call it business. Jace paced the room, breathing unevenly. Then what do we do? Emily pushed herself upright, ignoring the dizziness that resurfaced. We fight. Both men froze. Her voice steadied with every word. We've been reacting, hiding, hoping, panicking, letting them control the narrative. That ends now, Foisno. She looked at Tony. You have the truth. You have evidence. She looked at Jace. You have your DNA, your birthmark, your history, and I... She placed her hand on her chest. I was there when the truth surfaced. I saw the moment Tony recognized the mark. I heard what he said. I heard what the board just threatened. Tony leaned forward. Emily. No, she said firmly. I am done being afraid. I am done letting them dictate how our story ends. Jace stared at her with a mixture of awe and fear. And what are you suggesting? He asked softly. Emily stood slowly, her legs trembling, but her resolve unshaken. I'm suggesting we expose everything. The room went still. Tony's lips parted slightly, not in shock, but in something like admiration. You want to take down the board? No, Emily corrected. I want to take down the lie. She stepped closer to the two brothers, united by blood, broken by trauma, held together now by her defiance. We go public, she continued, not secretly, not quietly, loud. The kidnapping, the forged adoption, The 30-year cover-up. We bring lawyers, journalists, investigators. We force the truth into the light before they can twist it. Tony exhaled, a sound almost like relief. You're asking us to go to war. Emily nodded. Yes, because hiding won't save us. Only truth will. Jace swallowed, his eyes shimmering. Emily, you just collapsed. You're exhausted. She placed her hand on his cheek. And I will collapse again, and again, and again. But I won't collapse running away. A long silence. Then Tony stood. If we do this, he said, we do it together. He offered his hand. Jace looked at it, the hand of the brother he never knew he had, the man who had spent years searching for a ghost, and then looked at Emily. She nodded. Jace reached out and took Tony's hand. Tony turned to Emily next, extending his hand toward her as well, not as a billionaire, not as a superior, but as an equal in the fight ahead. Emily took it, and just like that, a fragile, uncertain alliance formed, built not from trust, but from necessity, truth, and the desperate need to survive the empire threatening to crush them. Tony inhaled deeply, releasing their hands. We start tonight, he said. I'll gather the evidence. Jace, you'll need to prepare a statement. Emily, he paused, eyes softening. Get some rest. You're the reason this is happening at all, and we need you strong. For the first time in days, a flicker of reassurance warmed Emily's chest. We're really doing this, she whispered. Tony nodded. Oh yes, we're going to expose them. Jace placed his arm around Emily's shoulders and reclaimed my life. Emily leaned against him, exhausted but resolute. Then let's finish what we didn't start, she said quietly. Let's end the lie. And together the three of them turned toward the window, the skyline of New York stretching out like a battlefield waiting for dawn. Their war had begun, their line had been drawn, and in the quiet before the storm, one thing became clear. The truth wasn't just coming, it was coming for everyone. Morning came with a cold, metallic sky, one of those New York mornings where even the light felt sharp enough to cut. Emily stood at the window of the hotel room Tony's security had placed them in overnight. Her fingers trembled on the curtain rope, nerves twisted so tightly she could barely breathe. This was it. Today, everything broke open. Behind her, the room was silent except for Jace's unsteady breathing as he stared at the DNA report on the table, its edges wrinkled from the number of times he had clutched it in panic. Tony stood near the door, dressed in a dark suit, tie undone, looking far more tired than a billionaire should. None of them had slept. Not after last night's threats. Not after learning the full truth buried in his father's files. Emily turned, swallowing her nerves. Are you both ready? Jace lifted his eyes, red, hollow, but determined. Ready? No, but I'm done running. Tony nodded once, quiet but steeled. They've hidden this long enough. The three stood together, equally broken, equally resolved. Today they weren't just confronting a corporation. They were confronting 30 years of buried trauma. The Hale corporate tower rose like a monolith into the gray clouds, windows gleaming in the morning light. It wasn't welcoming, Emily thought as they approached. It was intimidating, designed to look powerful, untouchable. But for the first time, it didn't scare her. Maybe because she wasn't walking in alone. Tony walked on her right, silent and focused. Jace walked on her left, shaking slightly but standing tall. Three people who should never have met, bound by a lie that tried and failed to destroy them. Security surrounded them the moment they entered. Mr. Hale, sir, the board is... I know, Tony cut in, his voice cold, and they'll wait. They took the private elevator to the top floor, passing through a gauntlet of fearful glances and whispered warnings. Emily felt the tension rising like electricity in the air. This tower was built on secrets. Today, they were tearing those secrets out brick by brick. The boardroom was already ready full when they entered. 12 executives, lawyers, PR heads, and two men Emily recognized from the surveillance photos, part of the team that had been shadowing her and Jace. The moment Jace stepped inside, the room went still. A woman in a red blazer stiffened. You brought him here? Tony, do you have any idea what you're doing? Tony ignored her and placed a thick folder on the table. We're bringing the truth. The board erupted in protest. "Oh, this is reckless. This will destroy us. You are risking billions. That boy is dead. We settled this years ago." Tony slammed a hand on the table. "He's not dead. He's standing right here." Silence fell. Jace flinched at the word boy, like he was an object, a case file, a mistake. Emily touched his arm, grounding him with her presence. Tony opened the folder and began laying out documents one by one. Forged adoption papers, financial transactions, hospital records altered, police bribery logs, and finally the DNA results. The lead lawyer paled. "Tony, where did you get all this?" "From my father's encrypted files," Tony said, voice shaking with anger. "Files he hid from everyone, including me." A man at the end of the table spoke, voice trembling. "Your father was protecting the company." Tony glared. "By lying about my brother's death? By stealing him from his actual life? By taking his identity away? That isn't protection. That's destruction." Another board member leaned forward. "Tony, listen. If this gets out, it will get out," Tony said, cutting him off, "in exactly 10 minutes. The PR director stiffened. "What?" "I alerted the press," Tony said. "They're waiting downstairs." Chaos exploded. Shouts, threats, accusations, demands for Tony's removal, warnings about stock crashes and shareholder backlash. But Tony didn't flinch. For once, he wasn't the billionaire empire heir trying to protect his father's legacy. He was a brother. A broken one, but a brother still. He looked at Jace with a sincerity that softened even the coldest air in the room. "You deserved your life back, and I'm giving it to you." Jace swallowed hard, fists clenched at his sides. "I didn't ask for any of this. I don't even know who I'm supposed to be." Tony nodded. "You don't have to know today, but you deserve the truth." Emily stepped between them, finding her voice in the chaos. "And I'm not letting anyone bury it again." Everyone stared at her, this small nurse in worn shoes and trembling hands, but her eyes were steady, fierce, unmovable. "This started with me," Emily said, "and I'm finishing it with them." The board members glared, but none spoke, because deep down they all knew this was over, and they had lost. The press conference room was packed by the time they arrived. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned over each other. Security formed a tight circle around the trio. Tony stood at the podium. Jace and Emily stood behind him. The moment Tony stepped forward, the room went silent. "My name is Tony Hale," he began, voice steady but thick with emotion. "Today, I am not speaking as CEO. I'm speaking as a son and a brother." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tony continued, "For 30 years, my family hid the truth about my brother's disappearance. They told the world he died. They told me he died. They lied to protect the company. Today, I correct that lie." He stepped aside, revealing Jace. Jace froze under the lights. Emily squeezed his hand once, then let go. Jace opened his mouth, but no words came. Tony placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "He's alive," Tony said quietly, "and he's here." Cameras exploded in flashes. Questions erupted. Reporters shouted over each other. Is he taking inheritance? Will he join the board? What happens next? Is this a scandal? Who forged the documents? What will happen to the Hale Empire? Tony just raised a hand. For the first time in decades, he said, "The truth happens next." And with that, he walked off stage. No spin, no excuses, just truth. The media storm erupted behind them, but Emily didn't look back. The hardest part was over. Hours later, they found themselves in Tony's private office. Doors closed, lights dimmed, the roar of the press fading into a distant hum. Tony stood by the window, head down, shoulders shaking. Emily froze. Jace stepped closer, hesitant. "Tony?" he whispered. Tony didn't turn. His voice broke. "I'm sorry." Jace's eyes softened. "For what?" "For not finding you sooner. For believing them. For everything." Jace swallowed and approached slowly. "Tony, you were a kid. You didn't know." Tony finally turned, tears streaking down his face. and neither did you. The two brothers moved toward each other slowly, like gravity was pulling them together after decades of forced distance. Then Tony opened his arms, and Jace stepped into them. Emily turned away as tears filled her eyes. Some things were too sacred to watch directly. The hug was long, raw, shaking, a reunion 30 years overdue. Later, when the brothers finally separated, Emily felt a gentle nudge against her shoulder. Jace. His expression was fragile, tired, but hopeful. "Nem, can we talk?" She nodded, heart pounding. They stepped into the hallway, quiet, private. "Emily," Jace began, voice thin, "I'm sorry for everything I said, for blaming you, for falling apart, for pushing you away." Emily shook her head. "Jace, you had your life stolen. Anyone would break. But you didn't," he whispered. "You held on." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. "We held on," she corrected softly. He closed his eyes, letting her words sink into the fractured parts of him. "I don't know who I am now," he whispered. "You're still my husband," she said gently. "That's a place to start." And he leaned into her, forehead against hers, breathing her in like a lifeline. Their marriage wasn't healed in a moment, but it wasn't broken anymore either. It was rebuilding, fragile, slow, hopeful, together. Evening settled over the city when the three of them stepped out of the Hale building. The giant glass doors closed behind them with a soft thud, like a book ending its darkest chapter. Emily stood between Tony and Jace as they walked down the steps. Three people, one stolen, one scarred, one who unknowingly started it all. Wind brushed against their faces. Traffic hummed in the distance. Lights flickered on across the city. And for the first time, there was peace. Emily glanced up at Jace. He squeezed her hand. Tony stood on her other side, breathing a little easier now, lighter than she'd ever seen him. Pain became truth. Truth became family. And one sentence from a nurse changed everything. If this story touched your heart, if Emily, Jace, and Tony reminded you that the truth can break us, but also set us free, please share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment where one small sentence, one tiny discovery changed your entire life? And don't forget to subscribe. Every week we bring you powerful stories about ordinary people facing impossible truths, unexpected revelations, and the kind of second chances that reshape families forever. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that sometimes a single moment can rewrite a lifetime.